Ever get a screenplay and you're like, there's something more going on here? That's sepia for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's not even just the plot, though we'll get to that, but the writer, right on the cover page, he left his contact info
Interesting.
and an address in Mexico City, email address, even a date. Like it was important. July 11th, 2002.
Mm.
Kind of makes you wonder, you know?
A little bit, yeah. Was it like a passion project or something?
Right, like a message in a bottle. What's the deal?
And the thing is, that kind of bleeds into the story itself, you know? The whole premise of Sepia is all about hidden stuff, desires.
Okay.
So picture this. A vintage camera, but instead of the regular pics, it snaps photos of what people secretly want.
No way.
Yeah, and get this, even if those desires, they involve other people.
Talk about juicy. And we meet Bernie, the guy who finds this camera, and he's all about trust.
Yeah.
Right? Like his first line is about how he and his girlfriend Ellie, they've never cheated. Ever.
Whoa, the irony. Talk about foreshadowing.
For real. So
Yeah.
what's going on there?
I think it's that classic conflict we all deal with, right? What we say we're all about versus, the stuff we're actually drawn to. Bernie, he starts off skeptical of this camera, obviously.
Who wouldn't be?
Totally. But
Yeah.
you can tell he's hooked. It makes you think how much of us wanting truth is really about control, in our relationships especially.
Oh, 100%.
Mm.
And speaking of Ellie, the way the screenplay lays out her character, early on at least, she's great.
She seems it, yeah.
You totally believe this is a woman who is head over heels for Bernie.
Yeah.
Trusts him completely, which makes the whole camera thing, well,
All the more devastating.
exactly.
Because it's not just some random cheating thing, right? The way I see it, the screenplay slowly shows us these camera photos. They're not just catching someone, checking someone else out. It's deeper. It's like their deepest longings.
Okay, hold on. Got to clarify. Deepest longings meaning.
Like not just who you think is cute at the moment. This is core level stuff. What a person truly yearns for, even if it goes against everything they say they believe in. It's like the camera's tapping into the subconscious, the raw, unfiltered stuff we try so hard to keep hidden.
And here's where I started thinking about the title, Sepia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kept picturing old photos, faded memories, all that.
Bingo. It's more than just a visual, it's totally a metaphor. Later on, the screenplay lets us know this camera, it uses a special sepia film. This film that reverses the colors like an inverse. So it's like what we think we're seeing, what we assume is true, could be the total opposite.
Whoa.
Just like those faded memories, right? They might not be as reliable as we tell ourselves they are.
Okay, so we've got trust issues, hidden desires. Maybe our memories are messed up. No wonder Bernie's world goes haywire. Especially with Ellie caught in the middle of it.
And to make matters worse, he does not handle it well. Remember the scene at the bowling alley?
Yeah?
He tests the camera on his friend, sees something he doesn't like, and boom, instant assumptions. It just shows how fast suspicion can grab hold, even for someone who's always preaching about trust.
And that's when I started to have my doubts about Bernie. I mean, is he really after the truth? Or just something to back up his own insecurities?
Which is genius, right? Because it makes us, the audience, question what we're seeing too. Are we getting the real Bernie or a warped version?
Right, like is this the full picture or some sepia-toned version of it? And then to make it even more complicated, we've got these other characters, Stacy and Dr. Rezo.
They're like total opposites, right? Stacy, she just accepts the camera, no problem. Almost like she represents how tempting those hidden desires can be.
I see what you mean.
And then you've got Dr. Rezo, Mr. Voice of Reason, trying to ground Bernie as his world spins out of control. But even he gets pulled in,
Yeah, he does.
Like the screenplay is saying, look, nobody's immune to wanting these secret truths, these peeks behind the curtain of who we are, who other people are.
And that's what makes this so good. It's not just, is this camera for real? But how does it make these characters react? Even us, the audience. Makes you think about some uncomfortable stuff.
Exactly. It's like our desires, our fears, the stuff we bury deep down.
And speaking of uncomfortable, that scene where Bernie confronts Ellie in their apartment, brutal.
Oh, man, I know, right?
He's got that photo, thinks it proves she's cheating, but you just feel how heavy his accusation is on her.
It's like he's crushing her with it.
Totally. And her line, how? You had me followed. How?
Oof. My heart broke for her. You can practically hear their trust shattering.
Yeah.
It's such a raw scene, you know? Really shows how much damage suspicion can do, especially when it comes from this messed up camera lens.
And the worst part is, this camera, even if it is showing these deep desires, it's just a snapshot. No context, no nuance. Right, like it's missing a whole story.
Exactly. Like seeing one frame of a movie and thinking, the whole plot. Bernie's so focused on this so-called proof, that he's missing the big picture entirely.
All those years with Ellie, gone.
Wasted.
It's like he's choosing to think the worst, even when there's barely any evidence. Which makes you think, maybe this is about how we all see things sometimes.
Oh, totally.
We notice what we want to notice, the stuff that backs up what we already believe, even if it means ignoring the truth right in front of us.
It's so true, and the screenplay gets that. It doesn't shy away from it at all. Bernie, after he walks out on Ellie, he tries to find proof, right, to make the camera story make sense, but he finds nothing.
Oh, man.
It's like the camera created this fake world full of suspicion and doubt, and he's stuck in it.
Alone. So, is the camera showing anything real? Or just reflecting back Bernie's own issues? Is sepia messing with more than memories? What about reality itself?
It's the question, right? And it sticks with you even when Bernie tries to fix things with Ellie. He goes back, wants to make it work, but the damage is done. She's heartbroken, calls him out on his need to be in control, his inability to just trust.
And that's where you see the real consequence of Bernie getting obsessed with this camera. He lost Ellie, not because of her, but because he couldn't just trust her, trust the love they had.
It's rough. And just when you think he's going to have to deal with what he's done, the screenplay throws in a curveball. Stacy.
It's like he was just starting to face the music and then bam, escape route. Right. New relationship, no baggage. Well, at least not out in the open yet.
But Stacy's not just some rebound, though. She's a catalyst, pushing Bernie further down the rabbit hole with this camera. She knows about the Sapia film, accepts it, and that just feeds Bernie's obsession even more.
Right. Like he's trying to run from what he did, the doubt he's feeling, by going all in on this world where everyone's desires are just out there, and the truth, even if it's twisted, is one photo away.
Exactly. And then she drops that bomb about the sepia film not just capturing desires, but the deepest longings of the person being deceived. It's like Bernie's been looking at these pictures the wrong way this whole time, misinterpreting the very thing he's chasing.
Wow. So what you're saying is maybe it's not showing us what we want to see, but what we're most afraid of.
Well, think about it. What if those pictures of Ellie aren't about her desires at all? What if they're showing Bernie's deepest fear? That she'll find someone else. Someone who won't treat her the way he did.
So the camera's holding up a mirror to Bernie's own insecurities,
Yeah.
just throwing his self-sabotage right back at him.
Exactly. And that hits him hard. Makes him question everything that's happened. Makes him face the fact that he might be the one who ruined everything.
So what does he do? He goes running back to Dr. Rezo, holding on to that undeveloped photo of Ellie for dear life. He wants answers, wants someone to tell him he hasn't messed it all up.
But even then, desperate as he is, there's that little flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Ellie's photo will be different. That the camera, for all its weird power, can't erase the love they had, the life they built together.
He needs that photo to be like a symbol of their connection, proof that some things are stronger than doubt.
He needs it to be. But our writer, Sergio, he's not letting us off that easy.
Nope, not at all.
Instead, we go deep into Bernie's head in these last few scenes. We see him begging Dr. Rezo to take his picture, wants to see what the camera sees. It's like he's trying to crack the code of this thing, get some control over the chaos it's unleashed.
And that ending. Bernie, staring at that photo of himself, the one we never get to see. Just that last line. Bernie rises his brows, his Adam's apple throbs. So what's it all mean? What did he see?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Sergio leaves us hanging. We have to figure it out for ourselves. Did Bernie see what he was most scared of? Or did the camera show him something even more messed up, something that changes how he sees himself, his own desires? We just don't know.
It's like that sepia effect lingers, even after the screenplay's over. It really makes you think about what's true, how we see things, and that blurry line between what we want and what might destroy us. If you could ask Sergio one question about sepia, what would it be? Let us know. Okay, so you know how when you start a good puzzle, you can never stop until you finish.
Yeah, I feel that.
Well, that's kind of what it's like reading a screenplay, right?
Yeah, totally. Especially those first few pages.
Exactly. The setup, it's like laying down the foundation for everything that comes after.
You're totally right. It's all about those early pieces and how they connect.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today with Transient.
Transient by Sergio Bustamante. Right. With the,
Yeah, with that tangled web of relationships.
Yeah.
Matt, Ethel, Cern, they just grab you from the first page.
Yeah, they really do. Especially Matt. I mean, talk about an intriguing character, a successful screenwriter, but with this kind of darkness hanging over him.
Right. Like his success is almost haunted. By the way, how did you say his name again? Is it Bustamante?
Bustamante, yeah. Sergio Bustamante.
Got it. Bustamante. So, back to Matt. It's almost like his art is imitating his life. His short film becomes this huge hit, but it's got these eerie parallels to some real-life events. Makes you wonder what he's tapping into. Inspiration, obsession.
Or something darker.
Right, like how much of himself is he pouring into this film?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's the interplay between Matt's, inner world and these relationships he has that I find so fascinating. Take his connection with Ethel, for example. You can tell she's totally into him. But there's this tension.
Oh, big time.
Ah.
You can practically cut the tension with a knife during that dinner scene, the one? With Zarek, the new actor.
Oh, yeah, with Derek.
And Ethel is trying so hard to brush off those weird things happening at the Meyerton house.
So the Meyerton house, right, where they're making the film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Matt's totally freaked out, and she's all, it's just an old house, creaky pipes, bad wiring, no big deal.
Trying to rationalize it away.
You think she's trying to convince him or herself?
Maybe a little bit of both. She doesn't even want to consider the possibility that something truly creepy might be going on.
It's wild how these little details, these throwaway lines, can reveal so much, huh?
Totally.
And then we've got Siren.
Matt's younger sister. Don't forget, she's battling a serious illness, which just adds this whole other layer of complexity to their relationship.
And Matt is so protective of her. It's actually really sweet.
It is. But it also feels kind of heavy, there's something from their past, something unspoken that's weighing him down.
Right. The screenplay mentions a past trauma they share. And I have to say, I am very curious to find out more about that.
Same. But yeah, you can really see that weight in those scenes where she's having nightmares. He so clearly wants to comfort her, but there's this restraint. He's holding back.
It's heartbreaking. You can feel his struggle. It's like he wants to protect her from everything, but he can't even protect her from her own nightmares.
Exactly. And then there's the Meyerton house itself, this imposing, creepy old place. It's practically a character in its own right, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's like this dark presence looming over everything.
And it's no coincidence that Matt chose this specific location for his film. Remember that detail about his first attempt to film there, the one that ended tragically?
Wait, remind me about that.
They mention these unexplained deaths during filming. A girl and a boy, if I remember correctly. And then Matt's project got shut down.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Talk about bad juju.
Exactly. It's like he's drawn to this darkness, this unresolved tragedy.
So what do you think? Is he consciously or subconsciously putting himself and those around him in harm's way?
Wow.
By choosing to film at this house again?
It certainly seems that way, doesn't it?
It's like he's almost asking for trouble, right? Going back to that house.
Yeah, it's a bold move, for sure. And then there are those creepy events you mentioned earlier, like the EVP recordings.
Oh my gosh, those EVP recordings. Heather and her team really captured something unsettling there.
Yeah, those distorted voices, those whispers. It's like the house itself is trying to tell them something, trying to communicate.
It's true. And they even found that old case file, the one from 1975, with all those chilling details about the fire.
The fire that killed all those people.
12 children and 3 adults, if I remember correctly. Tragic.
Ugh, it gives me chills just thinking about it. And to think, some of those ghostly kids Heather and Frank encountered, their fingerprints matched that old case file.
Right. Like, what are the chances? It's like Bustamante is intentionally blurring the lines between the living and the dead, past and present.
Totally. And don't even get me started on Johnson's little meltdown in the bathroom.
Oh, man. One minute he's Mr. Skeptic, the next he's running half naked out of the house.
Yeah.
What do you think caused that sudden change of heart? Fear gets to everyone, huh?
I think it just goes to show that even the biggest skeptics can be affected by the unexplainable, It's like the house feeds on those vulnerabilities.
Which reminds me, we have to talk more about Siran's illness. It's like this underlying tension that permeates everything.
It's impossible to ignore, that's for sure. Especially in that scene in the chemotherapy waiting room, when she connects with that young boy who's clearly been through so much already.
Heartbreaking. You can see the fear in her eyes. Like she's staring her own mortality in the face.
Exactly. And remember how she lashes out at her mother afterwards? All that anger, blaming her for not acting quickly enough.
She was just so angry.
It's raw emotion, pure desperation. It's tough to read, for sure.
And through all of this, you have Matt just trying to hold it together.
The film, the paranormal investigation, his sister's illness.
Yeah, talk about pressure. It's no wonder he's seeking answers in the supernatural, right?
It's like he's trying to outrun reality by diving into this haunted house mystery.
Maybe he thinks if he can solve the mysteries of the Meyerton house, he can somehow fix Siren too.
That's an interesting thought. Like, he can control the uncontrollable.
It's like he's searching for a way to cheat death,
Yeah.
to rewrite the script, you know?
Totally. And speaking of rewriting the script, what about Derek?
Oh, yeah, Derek. Talk about a curveball.
He really shakes things up, doesn't he?
It's not every day a replacement actor brings so much baggage to a film set.
Tell me about it.
You can tell from the moment they meet there's something between him and Siren.
Definitely. That scene where she opens up to him about her nightmares, about that night in the alley.
Ooh, chills.
It's like she instinctively trusts him with this incredibly vulnerable part of herself.
And it's not just trust, is it?
It's deeper than that.
Way deeper.
There's that scene where Siren is talking about her nightmares,
Ooh, yeah.
and she calls him the one. She says he saved her and her friend Sam.
Oh my God, chills. It's like they're connected somehow.
Totally. And what about that look Matt gives them when he walks in?
I know, right? Talk about awkward.
He can totally sense that something's up.
Yeah, and then later, when he finds that drawing
I mean, the one Siren drew of Derek.
with the angel wings,
Yes. Angel wings. Like, what is up with that?
I mean, it's obviously symbolic, right?
Yeah. But of what? Is she idolizing him? Is she afraid of him?
I think it's more complicated than that.
Definitely.
There's this sense of longing there, right?
Definitely.
Like she's searching for something, some kind of salvation.
And she sees that in Derek?
Maybe. Or maybe
Yeah.
she sees something of herself in him.
It's interesting, isn't it, how all these seemingly disparate elements, the house, the nightmares, Derek's arrival, they all kind of weave together
Totally.
to create this incredibly rich and unsettling tapestry.
Like Bustamante is exploring the idea that everything's connected.
It's exactly.
Past, present, life, death. It's all intertwined.
And that's what makes Transient so compelling. It's not just a horror story. It's a story about trauma.
And resilience.
Absolutely.
And the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of experiences.
Well said.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Transient, one question lingers. Will these characters find the answers they're so desperately seeking?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think that's what makes Bustamante such a master storyteller.
He leaves us wanting more.
He doesn't give us all the answers.
It makes us think.
He makes us feel.
It makes us question everything.
And that's the mark of a truly great screenplay.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, folks, there you have it. A deep dive into the haunting world of transients. Be sure to check out the screenplay and let us know what you think. We're dying to hear your theories on where Bustamante takes these characters next.
Ever cracked open a screenplay and just felt like, whoa, we are right in it right now?
Yeah,
That's what we're doing today with Sergio Bustamante's Transient.
absolutely.
You're going to need your thinking caps for this one, folks.
Yeah, it's amazing what Bustamante does in just those first few pages.
I know, right?
The screenplays are all about economy of language, right?
Yeah.
Trying to convey a whole world of emotion and detail, but you've
Yep.
got to do it really visually and with very little dialogue.
Yeah, and he doesn't waste any time, like, grabbing our attention.
No, he doesn't.
It's like, bam.
He just throws you right in.
You start in the barrel of a gun.
Yeah, right from that first frame, we're talking literally a bullet's eye view
And-
as it's fired. And then suddenly we're just thrown into this chaotic montage of images. And they're just seemingly disconnected images of a baby being born, a man collapsing in grief, a frantic news report. It's overwhelming.
It's like those dreams where you're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Trying to grasp at something and it just keeps moving.
Exactly.
Like 1 minute you're in a peaceful park, the next there's a newspaper headline screaming about some act of violence.
And it's so fascinating because what he does with these juxtapositions is he really establishes the film's core themes right from the get-go.
Yeah.
So it's not just life and death we're talking about here, but how closely they coexist in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Right. And they often show up in the most unexpected ways.
Yeah, it's like he's challenging us to find those connections.
Right.
Like, look for the meaning in what seems totally random.
Exactly.
And then there's that chilling voiceover line, almost like an observer just detached from it all, talking about losing faith in both life and death.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
That line for me speaks to the heart of what the film's really exploring, and it's this idea of disillusionment.
Okay.
This search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd.
Yeah.
And it's like Bustamante is setting the stage for a story that's going to challenge our perceptions of reality itself.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
totally. And just when we think we're getting our bearings, it ends,
Yes.
throws us into a whole other setting. And we meet Matt Simon, our protagonist, at the premiere of his short film.
It's such a brilliant cinematic strategy.
I know, it's like whiplash.
Yeah. taking us from that frenetic energy of the montage to just a single static shot of Matt bathed in that warm glow of the projector light. He's cracking jokes, charming the audience, but you can tell there's something else going on there.
There's a facade.
Yes.
It's all very carefully constructed, but it's
Okay.
like he's found a way to control the chaos,
Right.
at least within his films.
Exactly.
And there's that part where he jokes about his short film Ringer being based on a true crime he saw on TV.
Right.
It almost seemed like a throwaway line,
Yeah.
but I couldn't help but think, is there something more there?
I think that line is key to understanding this character.
Really?
He is someone who processes trauma and the anxieties of the world around him by transforming them into art.
Interesting.
But you have to wonder, how healthy is that coping mechanism really?
Right.
And what happens when reality can't be so easily edited out?
Yeah, what happens when reality intrudes? Because then we meet his girlfriend, Ethel.
Yeah.
We find out his younger sister is really sick,
Mm-hmm.
and she's pulling away.
Yes. And this is where the film starts to unpack the complexities of Matt's character. Because he's used to finding solace in storytelling, right?
Right.
Shaping narratives to make sense of the world.
Okay.
But how is he going to handle a situation that resists that? That challenges his sense of order?
Yeah. How do you control that?
Exactly. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of support does Matt not have because of this need to be in control,
Right.
to craft these narratives?
Right.
And so when something comes along that really resists both of those things,
Yeah.
how's he going to deal with it?
Exactly.
And that tension bleeds right over into his professional life, too.
Right. Well, yeah, because we're talking about his first feature film,
Exactly.
which, every filmmaker, it's like, that's the dream, right?
It is.
But then enters Thornburg.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here comes the trouble.
This is going to be good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and Thornburg's more than just a troubled actor, though.
Oh, really?
If you think back to those really jarring juxtapositions
Right.
in that opening montage,
Okay.
Thornburg represents that same kind of recklessness,
Interesting.
this disregard for consequences
Yeah.
that echo the fragility of life that Bustamante set up visually early on.
So it's like his character is there to embody that chaos
Exactly.
that Matt's always trying to, keep at bay.
Yes, and the way his story arc plays out, the DUI, A Life Cut Short,
Oh, right.
just reinforces those themes of life and death colliding in these brutal and unexpected ways.
It's so true. And, it makes me think about those times in your own life when you encounter someone and their recklessness seems to mirror some larger thing going on.
Absolutely.
Like, how much are we responsible for and how much is just the way it is?
It's such a good question.
Right?
And I think that's what Transient really wants us to wrestle with.
Yeah, for sure.
But back to Matt, because just when you think things can't get worse with
Huh.
this film production,
Yeah.
he meets Derek.
Oh, Derek. He's
Yeah.
such a mystery
Yeah.
because he's brought in as the new lead
Right.
after, Thornburg's out.
Right.
And on the surface, he's everything Thornburg wasn't.
Yes.
He's collected.
Right.
Almost too good to be true.
Exactly. And what's so striking is that Bustamante uses these really specific cinematic choices to kind of build that suspense around Derek.
Interesting.
We expect the worst after Thornburg.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But with Derek, it's what we don't know.
Right.
Where does he go when he's not on set? Why does he have this haunted look in his eye?
It reminds me of that thing Hitchcock used to say
What's that?
about suspense.
Yeah.
Showing the audience the bomb under the table isn't nearly as scary as letting them know it's there
Oh, that's good.
and then just letting them think about it.
Exactly.
Exactly. And you have that throughout this,
Oh, for sure.
that sense of unease.
Yes.
Like something's coming.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Something's not quite right.
It's that old saying, right? If you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras.
Right.
And here we are thinking zebras. It's like the house itself becomes a character.
100%.
And it's got secrets.
Yes.
We get these glimpses of them, right?
Yeah.
These whispers that something really awful happened there.
Totally.
But he doesn't tell us what it is.
Right.
He leaves it vague.
And that's what's so smart, because we have to fill in the blanks.
We can't help ourselves.
Exactly.
We're right there with Matt and the crew.
And something could be lurking right around the corner.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he takes those classic thriller elements,
Totally.
haunted house,
Right.
mysterious stranger.
Right.
But there's this extra layer of psychological stuff going on.
Yeah, it's like we're not just waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's like we're trying to figure out if there was ever even a shoe there to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
He's playing with us,
Yeah.
blurring those lines between what's real and what's in their heads.
And what's imagined, and it makes me think back to that opening montage again.
Yes.
Those images,
Yeah.
birth, death, violence.
Right.
What if those were clues?
What if they were?
Like, were we supposed to be paying closer attention?
Exactly.
Because he's giving us those, and Matt's getting those as he's going deeper into this film, deeper into this house.
Well, and what if those seemingly disconnected moments are actually glimpses into Matt's subconscious?
Whoa.
Right? Like, what if they're premonitions of what's going to happen?
Okay.
Think about that shot of the death certificate.
Yeah.
We never actually saw the name.
No, we didn't.
What if it turns out to be someone connected to Matt?
Oh, my God.
What if it's someone who died in that house?
Okay, see, now you're freaking me out a little bit.
Well, and that line from the voiceover,
Oh, don't even get me started.
when you've lost faith in life and death,
So good, right?
it just gets right to the core of what this film is about.
It really does.
This idea that how we understand life and death
Yeah.
and reality, even it's always changing.
Yeah.
Matt's trying to control it by creating stories.
Right.
But what happens when the stories start to control him?
Man, and even going back to Ringer,
Yes.
his short film,
Right.
he's like, oh, yeah, it's just based on this true crime thing I saw.
Mm.
But what if it's more than that? What if
Resp-
it's really his deepest fears?
That's what's so brilliant about how this is written.
I know, right?
He doesn't give us the answers.
No, right.
Instead, he's like, here are all these tools, these visuals, this dialogue, these really interesting characters. Go figure it out.
I love that so much.
It's great.
It really is. And that's what makes a deep dive like this so fun.
Yes.
It's not just like what happened in the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, what's he trying to say?
Exactly.
What are those bigger questions?
And trusting the audience
Yeah.
to engage with it on their own.
Yes, exactly. And figure it out for themselves.
Yes.
So I guess as we wrap up here, the question I keep coming back to is
Yeah.
how much of what we see is real and how much is all in Matt's head?
Right.
And does it even matter?
Right.
As long as it's a good story.
It's true.
I don't know, but I'm going to be thinking about this for a while.
Me too.
And I hope you are too.
Mhm.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Transient.
Okay, so we're really diving into it today, huh? Straight into the deep end with Transient. Just from reading the screenplay, it's got this creepy vibe, like a classic haunted house story, but with layers.
It's so smart how the writer, Bustamante, weaves in those classic elements. You've got the spooky old house, Meyerton House, right? And then layer on top of that, you've got a film production going on, which already has its own kind of heightened reality, right? And
Yeah. And then, as if that wasn't enough, you bring in this whole other dimension with Matt, the director. He's dealing with this heavy personal loss. His sister Siren is sick, and it's like, how much can one guy handle, right?
And it makes you wonder, does that personal grief, that emotional weight play into the strange stuff happening at Meyerton House? Is it just a coincidence that everything seems to unravel as Matt's dealing with all of this?
Well, and let's be real. The screenplay doesn't skimp on the creepy stuff, right? I mean, we're talking flickering lights, objects moving on their own, that whole poltergeist vibe, and even these fleeting glimpses of what look like ghostly children.
Which, if we're going full-on paranormal investigation here, could point to a few different things. We might be looking at a classic haunting, a spirit tied to Meyerton's history, maybe even seeking some kind of resolution.
Okay, so you said haunting, but earlier you mentioned poltergeist. What's the difference? Because I feel like most people, myself included, kind of lump all that spooky stuff together.
Yeah, it's easy to do that. But there are some key distinctions. A haunting traditionally is more about a presence, a spirit tied to a person or a place. You'll see apparitions, hear voices, feel occult spots, stuff that's usually linked to the deceased person's life. Poltergeist activity, though, it's almost like a force, more unpredictable.
So less like seeing a ghost and more like having that ghost throw furniture at you.
Pretty much. And what's really interesting is that poltergeists are often connected to a living person, someone who's experiencing intense emotions, maybe even trauma. It's like this outpouring of psychic energy they can't control.
So you're saying Matt's grief over Siren could actually be causing some of these weird occurrences?
It's definitely a possibility the screenplay wants us to consider. And then you've got Frank, the parapsychologist they bring in. He starts out as a total skeptic, wants to debunk everything.
Which, let's be honest, is probably what most of us would do in that situation. You're looking for the logical explanation, the prankster on set, anything but actual ghosts.
Right, exactly. But as things at Meyerton House get weirder, Frank's skepticism starts to waver. And that's where the story really gets interesting, when you're forced to confront the possibility that something unexplainable is happening.
And then you've got these two characters, Johnson and Dern, who bring this whole other energy to the story. Like, are they private investigators?
Yeah.
Paranormal experts? It's kind of hard to tell at first.
It's like they walked straight out of, I don't know, like a hard-boiled detective movie. You just get this sense that they've seen it all, the underbelly of Hollywood, you know?
Exactly. And even they're taken aback by Meyerton House. Like, they try to play it cool, but you can tell something's off.
Right from the start, too. Like that scene where the trick almost plows right into the set. Everyone thinks it's a prank. Some kind of publicity stunt gone wrong, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But Johnson and Dern, they're not so sure. They start noticing things don't quite add up, little inconsistencies.
Which, of course, just makes everything creepier. Like, if it's not a publicity stunt, what's really going on here?
And just when you think the screenplay is going to go all Scooby-Doo and reveal some guy in a mask behind it all, it takes this crazy dark turn.
The corpse. Finding that body in Meyerton House, it changes everything. Suddenly, it's not just about spooky events, it's a full-on crime scene.
And the way Bustamante describes that discovery, the attic room, the dust, it's so vivid, so unsettling, really drives home that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that are actually real, you know?
No ghosts needed, right? And it shifts the entire focus. The police get involved, and even they seem a little unnerved by Meyerton House.
Well, wouldn't you be? I mean, we're talking about a house with a history of tragedy, a fire that killed all those kids, too. Then you have those missing girls, those stories they told about being rescued by children.
And that's where the screenplay's exploration of residual energy really gets interesting. It's not just about the events themselves, but the emotional weight, the trauma that gets imprinted on a place.
So, like, Meyerton House is almost like a sponge that soaked up all this darkness over the years, and it's still there, seeping out.
Yeah, and that's the suggestion, that some places are just stained by the past. No matter how much time passes, those echoes remain. And the screenplay really emphasizes the vulnerability of children, too, which adds to this feeling of unease, both the children who died in the fire, and then these stories about the missing girls, and the children who supposedly helped them.
Okay, now that is seriously creepy. It's like those kids are somehow linked to Meyerton House, both in life and in death. And then you start to see these parallels between the house's history and what Matt's going through with Siren. It's like the screenplay suggesting that grief, that kind of intense emotional pain, can make us more susceptible to, I don't know, to the unexplained.
Like, it opens a door in our minds, maybe even a door to another realm, and suddenly the line between what's real and what's not becomes very blurry.
We're back. And things at Meyerton House are just getting weirder, right? We've got this haunted history, a film set that's now a crime scene, and characters who are starting to question everything they thought they knew.
And what's really effective about the way Transient is structured is that it keeps you guessing. Just when you think you've got a handle on things, it throws another curveball.
Like Johnson, the investigator. He's been so skeptical this whole time, but then he has that experience in the shower at Meyerton, and it completely unravels him.
That scene is masterful. It plays on those primal fears, the darkness, the enclosed space, the feeling of being watched. And the screenplay doesn't even show us what he sees. It just lets our imaginations run wild.
Right. It's almost like it's saying, here's the possibility of something truly terrifying. Now you deal with it. And poor Johnson just cracks, leaves Meyerton House, and doesn't look back.
Which, you know, you can't really blame him, can you? But Dern, he's another story. He's like a dog with a bone, digging deeper into the history of Meyerton, even as it gets darker and darker.
And it gets really dark. That fire, the missing girls, the stories about those children, it all adds up to this deeply unsettling picture.
It makes you question everything, right? What's real, what's imagined, what's the connection between the past and the present? And then Bustamante introduces Heather, another paranormal investigator who brings a whole other perspective.
Yeah, she's not afraid to challenge the status quo. She talks about wraiths, which I'll admit I had to look up. But basically they're like more tangible ghosts, capable of interacting with the physical world.
Which is a pretty terrifying thought, especially when you consider that scene where Frank and Roger see that woman, the one who's naked, bruised. It's implied that she's connected to Meyerton's past, maybe even a victim of whatever darkness resides there.
See, this is what I mean about Transient. It just keeps throwing these unsettling images at you, and then it's like, okay, now make sense of that. And then there's that mysterious little girl that Mark encounters, the sound engineer. Is she another victim? Is she somehow connected to those ghostly children we keep hearing about? The screenplay doesn't give us concrete answers, which only adds to the mystery.
It's like Bustamante wants us to sit with the unknown, to embrace the idea that some things just can't be explained away. And then there's Derek, the actor. His connection to Siren, the fact that he might have played a role in saving her life years ago, it adds this whole other layer to the story.
It's like Is he who he says he is? Or is there something more going on with him? The screenplay hints at the possibility that he might be connected to the paranormal activity at Meyerton, but again, it's never explicitly stated.
And that's what makes Transient such a compelling read. It doesn't shy away from the big questions, but also doesn't feel the need to provide easy answers. It leaves you with a sense of unease, a feeling that there's more to the story than meets the eye.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into transients, we're left with this lingering question. What really happened at Meyerton House? Was it haunted by ghosts, poltergeists, wraiths, or something else entirely? And what about Matt, the director? Did his grief somehow act as a catalyst for the paranormal events that unfolded?
The screenplay doesn't provide definitive answers, and that's okay. Because sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that stay with us long after we've finished reading them. The ones that make us think, question, and maybe even look over our shoulders when we think no one's watching. And that, I think, is the true mark of a well-crafted thriller like Transient.
Ah, that certainly leaves you with plenty to think about.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we've journeyed into the heart of Transient, a screenplay that weaves together elements of the supernatural, psychological thriller, and good old-fashioned mystery. It's a story that gets under your skin, lingers in your thoughts, and reminds us that sometimes the most unsettling truths are the ones we can't explain. Until next time, keep exploring those shadowy corners, but be careful not to get lost in the dark.
And maybe keep a nightlight on, just in case. All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously creepy stuff? Because today, we are taking on the Meyerton House saga.
Oh, Meyerton House. Now that's a location with some stories to tell.
Yeah, you've got the house itself, this imposing old place with a seriously dark past, and now it's known as the main location for that film, Numinous. But get this, the real-life stuff happening off-screen. Way creepier than anything the writers came up with.
It's interesting how often we see this kind of bleed through between fiction and reality. You take this film, Numinous, a story about a haunting, and suddenly, life starts imitating art in the strangest ways.
Right. Wrecked trucks on set, crew members freaking out, talking about seeing ghosts, and then, to top it all off, they find a dead body.
It's that layering, the house's history, combined with the film's subject matter, and then these unexplained events on top of it all. It really makes you question what's really going on.
And the rumors? Don't even get me started on the rumors. Let's just say they involve children. And leave it at that for now.
Each new detail just seems to add another layer of complexity to the case.
Okay, so about Meyerton House's history, it's not your average spooky old house, you know.
Oh, definitely not. This place has some seriously dark energy clinging to it.
Multiple deaths, a horrific fire, and then you've got those stories about violence against children. It's the kind of history that gets under your skin.
And you can't dismiss it as just local legends or ghost stories, because the police reports back up a lot of it. There's something genuinely unsettling about Meyerton House.
Speaking of unsettling, get this. The Numinous screenplay, it mentions a door, right? A missing door that used to lead to a veranda. Well, guess what? That veranda, long gone. But back in the day, it was a kitchen. The very same kitchen where a fire broke out in 1975.
Whoa.
Coincidence. I don't know about that.
That's quite a parallel. And it gets even weirder when you consider that the screenplay is full of these sudden blackouts, flickering lights. And guess what the police reports from Meyerton House over the years mention? Flash victims, people experiencing similar blackouts.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's almost like someone or something is trying to replay those traumatic events.
Like an echo of the past trapped within the walls of the house. So we've got this house, right? Practically radiating bad vibes. But how can we be sure it's genuine paranormal stuff? I mean, how do we rule out, like, someone just trying to drum up publicity for the film?
Oh, right, because a good ghost story is great for marketing.
Exactly. So where do we even start with separating fact from fiction?
Well, we have to look at the evidence, not just the screenplay and the police reports, but also what we know about paranormal phenomena from research.
Okay, so let's start with the Numinous screenplay itself. We've got Frank, one of the characters, totally obsessed with ghosts, right? He's running around with EMF readers, talking about paranormal hotspots. It's almost like he's setting the stage for a real haunting.
It's an interesting parallel, right? The way this screenplay seems to anticipate or maybe even invite these real-life events.
Totally. But it goes beyond just your typical haunted house tropes. Frank, he keeps mentioning these specific things, negative ions and cold spots, and apparently those are considered classic signs of a haunting.
And what's fascinating is that there is actually some scientific basis for those claims, or at least potential connections. Some researchers believe that negative ions, like those found in the air after a thunderstorm, can create an environment where people are more prone to unusual experiences, whether that's paranormal or just altered states of consciousness. Well, that's still up for debate.
So we're talking actual science potentially backing up the spooky stuff. This is getting wild.
Right. It's not just random spooky elements thrown in for effect. They're actually drawing on real theories and research in the field of paranormal investigation.
And it's not just the scientific stuff either. The screenplay also mentions a specific smell, but it's not the typical rotting smell you might expect. It's described as something different, almost otherworldly.
That detail about the smell is interesting. It suggests something more than just a natural process of decomposition, something that hints at a presence beyond our understanding.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely creepy. And speaking of creepy, we can't forget about that scene in the shower, the young girl. That whole part of the screenplay always gives me chills.
Yeah, and that's where the screenplay seems to intersect with those police reports you mentioned.
Right. The police found that teenage girl wandering near Myerton House, obviously traumatized. And then you have that scene in the script with that mysterious young girl appearing in the shower. It's just too much of a coincidence.
It definitely raises questions about what might be happening at Myerton House. Are we dealing with a traditional haunting, a residual energy from past events, or is it something more active, something like a poltergeist?
The screenplay gives us ghosts, poltergeists, but the police reports ground everything in a very real, very human element of trauma.
Exactly. And if we consider the possibility of a poltergeist, the next logical question becomes, who is it connected to, and what is fueling its energy?
And the screenplay doesn't shy away from suggesting it might be Matt's younger sister, Siren.
Ah, yes, Siren, that's where things get even more intriguing.
Right, she's dealing with this terrible illness, and there are all these hints that her emotional state could be impacting what's happening at Myerton House.
And there is a lot of research on the link between poltergeist activity and individuals, especially adolescents, who are experiencing intense emotional distress. Siren's illness, the fear, the potential anger. Those emotions could be a powerful source of energy.
And Siren talks about having these vivid nightmares, right? Nightmares about some kind of traumatic event from her past. She doesn't go into details at first, but then she reveals that it involves Derek, the lead actor from the film.
It's as if these separate threads, the trauma, Siren's emotional state, and the unsettling events at Myerton House, are all starting to weave together into this really unsettling tapestry.
Okay, so we have the nightmares, and then Siren drops this other bombshell. She claims that Derek actually saved her from some kind of violent attack when she was younger.
That's a significant detail, especially when you consider...
The police reports.
Exactly. The police reports mention an attempted assault where the victim was helped by, wait for it, children.
You're kidding.
Nope. And remember Siren's drawing.
The one of Derek with angel wings.
That's the one. It's like every piece of information we uncover brings us closer to the heart of this mystery, but also deepens the sense of unease.
It's like the house itself, or whatever's there, it's taking these past traumas, weaving them together with the anxieties of the film crew, and just amplifying everything.
And the numinous screenplay, it's almost like a blueprint for the events unfolding around them.
It's like they accidentally wrote their own horror movie into existence. So much to unpack here. We've got this whole mess of trauma, potential ghosts, maybe a poltergeist, and right at the center of it all, Myerton House. But we still have some big question marks, even with all these clues, like that girl in the truck, the one Mark sees, remember him? The tech guy.
Right.
Is she another echo of Myerton's past, maybe connected to those children from the fire back in '75? Or is there something else going on with her?
That's the thing about these kinds of mysteries, you know? They don't give you easy answers. If anything, we end up with more questions than we started with.
And it's not like she's just a passive observer, right? I mean, she's interacting with the set, hiding stuff, even drawing on those magazines they found. Like, she's trying to say something.
It's like she's trying to communicate, but we just don't have the right dictionary to understand her.
Exactly. And that makes me think, are we just projecting? Are we so desperate for answers that we're seeing patterns in random events? Or is there really something going on here, something we just can't explain with our current understanding of?
Yeah.
Well, everything.
It's a question that haunts a lot of paranormal research. How much is environmental,
Yeah.
psychological, and how much could be truly beyond.
Honestly, part of me wants a rational explanation for everything that went down at Myerton. Like maybe it's just a string of crazy coincidences, you know? But there's another part of me, the part that loves a good mystery, that can't help but think there's something more going on.
And that's what makes these cases so compelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
The unknown, the unexplained. It pushes us to confront the limits of what we think we know about the world.
It's kind of unsettling when you think about it. So what happens to the film? Do they try to use all this weirdness to their advantage? Like, get your tickets for Numinous, the movie filmed in a real haunted house.
You know, I'm not sure. That would be pretty exploitative, but stranger things have happened in Hollywood.
True, true. But with a police investigation and everything.
It's definitely a PR nightmare. But regardless of what happens with the movie, one thing is clear. Myerton House has impacted everyone who stepped foot on that property. It forces you to confront this idea that there are things in this world, maybe even within ourselves, that we can't explain.
It's like that old saying, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones on screen, they're the ones we keep hidden inside.
And that's what I hope people take away from this deep dive. What are the Myerton houses in your own life? What are the things you're afraid to face, the stories you tell yourself to make sense of the unknown? And most importantly, are you brave enough to seek out the truth, even if it leads you somewhere dark?
That's some heavy stuff to ponder. To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the strange case of Myerton House. Until next time, stay curious, but maybe sleep with the lights on.